Yep, so today we're starting with the new chapter, which is chapter 9, and chapter 9 looks at parenting. Okay, so we finished looking at healthy and respectful relationships. We finished looking at the types of development and how that changes across the lifespan. And now we're just focusing on this idea of parenting and early childhood development. So essentially, we're going to be looking at things like fertilization. We're going to be looking at the stages of prenatal development. We're going to be looking at, what does it mean to be a parent? What are the different factors that influence new parents? What are the kind of resources available to people who become parents? Okay, and how does obviously how does different kinds of parenting affect a child's development and health and dimensions of health and well-being? So that's essentially everything that we're going to be looking at in this specific chapter. So the first thing that we're doing is we're going to be starting with 9.2 spread. So that's the only thing we're going to be covering. 9.2 is the main spread we're going to be covering for today. And 9.2 focuses on the considerations that we have to take when becoming a parent. So before you become a parent, what are the things you have to keep in mind? What are the different questions you might be asking yourself in terms of you being the best, most available, most effective parent possible that will provide an optimal environment for the child that you're bringing into the world? Okay, so that's essentially what this topic is about. Now, before we look at the actual idea of, what are the different considerations that we have to take before becoming a parent, we have to properly define what is parenting. So parenting is simply the activity of raising a child, okay? Now, remember that when we talk about parenting, it doesn't necessarily only refer to, a child's relationship with their biological parent. Okay, we can't just narrow that definition of parenting to just the biological parents. We have to remember that children who are adopted, children who have step parents, foster parents, all of these people, even if you're just a carer, even if you didn't actually give birth to that child, the relationship that you have with a child that you're raising and you're bringing up can still be or can still fall under this idea of parenting. Okay, it's not just about giving birth to that child or that child being related to you by blood. Okay, so that's essentially what parenting is about. Now, parenting is the idea of raising a child, but we also have to remember that raising a child itself is a very broad concept. Okay, there's so many things that are involved in raising a child. So we have to remember that raising a child involves or includes this set of behaviors that basically explain to us or that reflect how this parent is interacting with the child every single day. Whether it's, making sure they get up on time, to go to school, whether it's making sure they have proper lunch and proper snacks in between, making sure they're hydrated, making sure they get proper physical activity, making sure they take their baths on time, all that kind of stuff is a part of what parenting is about. Okay, so parenting is the activity of raising a child, and raising a child is an active process. It's not something that I can just sit on my little recliner chair and just be like, yeah, do this, do that. You have to be actively involved. Okay, and you might have heard that a lot of new parents say, oh, it's just so exhausting running around my child, making sure, you're looking after another human being. So obviously, in order to properly meet the needs of the child and thus be an effective parent, you do need to ensure that you are being an active parent and actively raising that child. Okay, so that's what parenting is about. Now, if we go to the next slide, we learn about the responsibilities of parenting. So essentially, when you become a parent, what are the different rights that you should be giving your child? What are the different expectations or the different objectives you should be meeting? We have to remember that when children are, when we're dealing with children, when we're dealing with infants or babies or even toddlers, you have to realize that these people are fully dependent on, parents. Okay, they're fully dependent on an adult to look after them. They can't look after themselves. So as an adult, as someone who is looking after that child, who has brought that child into the world or who has adopted them or whatever, you have to basically be giving them their rights. And some of the rights are that children have the right to live a full life. As a parent or a guardian has no right to put the child's life in danger or to expose them to harm that could lead the child to die prematurely. Okay. Children have the right to good quality healthcare. If the child gets sick, regardless of what the parents' views are, you might have heard of some people being anti-vaxxers, which means that they're against vaccination. Okay, even if the parent has that belief, it's not fair for them to then impose that on a child who's extremely sick or who might be at risk of developing some disease that could have just been prevented by getting an immunization. Okay, so children have the right to good quality healthcare. They have the right to clean water, nutritious food, and a clean environment. So obviously, if your house is like a dump before you have a child, you have to make sure that it isn't a dump when you have a child. Because if you've got like little, little bits of mess lying around, the kid might just put that in their mouth, or the kid might trip over something. So it's important to make sure that your house is mostly clutter-free and mostly clean and hygienic as well. Okay, children have the right to a standard of living that is good enough to meet their physical and mental needs. So essentially what this means is that if the child kind of screams, or if the child kind of shouts out in pain, someone is there to attend to them. Someone is there to be like, oh, what's wrong? Are you okay? If the child's nappy is full and needs to be changed, someone is there to change the nappy for the child. Okay, whether it's a parent, whether it's a sibling, someone is there basically to look after the child. And we have to remember that parents are not always necessarily adults, like old people that in their 40s or 50s or whatever. If you've got if there's a big age gap between, for example, you and your new baby brother or sister, you might actually become like a co-parent for your sibling, for your baby sibling, okay? Because you are old enough to look after them. You might be old enough to change your nappy. Your parents might have showed you how to do that. Okay, so it's completely reasonable and often common that an older sibling also takes on a parenting role. Okay, children have the right to relax, play, and join. So a lot of the time when a new baby is born, parents tend to buy them new toys. They tend to buy them new things that will keep them, that will be keeping them kind of active and enjoying their time, essentially. And children have the right to reliable information from the media and mass media as well. So this is more to do with not like infants, but like I suppose like older children, like 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. So when a 3-year-old or 4-year-old is watching ABC Kids or some other like kid-based channel, there shouldn't be like violent ads coming up or explicit ads coming up that could be harmful for the child or make them feel scared. Okay, so obviously it is a parent's responsibility to ensure that these rights are protected, okay, as much as possible. Now, no parent is perfect, and there might be little things that go wrong here and there, but essentially most of the time we have to ensure that these broad rights are always protected, because these rights are, again, about protecting the safety and well-being and the welfare of these children, okay? That's why these rights are put into place, safety and well-being. Okay, and only if we achieve these rights will we be able to promote the best development for the child in all those areas of development: physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. So that's what the responsibilities of parenting are. Now, you might be thinking, hey, wow, that's a lot of responsibilities. How much do we actually need to know? Well, just know at least maybe 3. Okay, a lot of them are common sense, but just know at least 3 for the SAC and you should be okay. Alrighty, so the next slide that we're looking at is talking about the social factors in parenting. Now, we have to understand that in the past 50 years or in the past few decades, there have been a lot of changes that have occurred in terms of parenting, okay? If you ever asked your grandma or your grandpa, okay, when did you become a parent? They might have told you, oh, I had my, we had our first kid when we were like, when I was 18 and your grandma was 16. Or something like that, or even younger than that, perhaps. Okay, so obviously, depending on the social environment in which we grow up, we have to remember that what we see as a little bit abnormal now, like, oh my God, my grandma had, my aunt when she was, 16, that's so weird, like I'm 16, how does that work? We have to remember that they grew up in a different social time and they were influenced by different social factors. Today, we have to remember that we are also influenced by different social factors growing up in the current time that we are. So some of these different social factors that influence when people become parents, as well as how they eventually behave when they become parents, is again a result of the changing social climate and the changing social context. So the number one thing we have to remember is that women are actually becoming pregnant a lot later and becoming mothers for the first time a lot older than previous generations. So they're essentially delaying motherhood. Okay, and there are a number of reasons for why women are delaying motherhood or delaying the first, can't even draw with this thing, Okay, delaying the first child that they have. Okay, I need to get a new stylus, I think. Delaying motherhood. So essentially what that means is that they are not giving birth when they're 18 or 19. They're delaying when they get married. They're delaying when they decide to have a child. And one of the reasons for this is that more women are working full-time. And obviously when you have a child, you can't work full-time and have a child at the same time, which is one of the reasons why women tend to take maternity leave when they have a baby. Okay, different income and educational levels. More women are going on to pursue higher education, like, you know, bachelor degrees, master's degrees, all that kind of stuff. So obviously women are not just, you know, dropping out of school in year 9 or year 10, as they might have done 50 years ago. They're actually going on to achieve higher education, and society accepts that that is okay for women to do now, as compared to back in those days. Okay, women are also achieving different incomes. So one of the main reasons women used to marry back in the early days was to basically be financially secure, okay? And generally marrying a man was considered to allow them to be financially secure, allow them to basically be able to be looked after from a financial point of view. Because a lot of women are working themselves now, achieving very high levels of education and are quite independent themselves, they don't really need to marry early on in order to have that income. They can do that themselves. Higher divorce and remarriage rates. So another reason why people delay parenting is that there are higher divorce rates now than there were before. A lot of people, especially when getting into a relationship straight away, they don't always have babies straight away because, again, they have to get to know each other a little bit more. Sometimes when people divorce straight away as well, that can be an issue. So a lot of people kind of delay having kids right away as compared to maybe 50 years ago. And sometimes there are people nowadays who, when they do get divorced or separated from their partner, they actually decide that, you know what, if I am pregnant, I'm just going to raise this kid on my own, and it's not a big deal. Like, I can do that. So essentially, single parenthood is something that it's not like, oh, this guy just left her in the dumps and now she's a single parent, but it's something that they've decided to do. They had the choice to abort the baby if they wanted to, but they didn't. They decided to keep the baby and raise the baby on their own. Okay, so that's essentially a few of the social factors. And from this slide, just know at least maybe 2 and explain how any 2 of these factors has led to changes in parenting and how people carry the parenting role. Okay, so that's essentially the social factors. Okay, now the next thing are a few questions that we're looking at with reference to parenting. Okay, the first consideration or the first question a parent needs to ask themselves, a potential parent needs to ask themselves before having a kid is, can the child's needs be met? So as a parent, can I afford to provide this child with nutritious food? Can I afford to provide them their own room or their own nursery where they can have their own little cot or their crib, where they can have good quality resources like nappies, baby wipes, all that kind of stuff? Okay, can I provide them a safe environment where, you know, there's not a lot of noise or there's not a lot of hazards in the house all the time? Can I provide them with an adequate housing? So a house where I'm not going to be kicked out at any moment, where this is our home and this is a stable kind of shelter. And can I provide them with access to healthcare? So if the child gets sick, can I then take them to the doctors? Is there, you know, are there facilities in my suburb which allow me to do that? And a lot of you might be like, well, yeah, there's like a doctor every 2 streets you go down. Well, if you're living in a remote area in Australia where there's no healthcare, you might actually think twice before having a baby, or you might even relocate your home in order to have that baby, because you want to make sure that there are hospitals and medical centers close by. Okay, we have to also be able to meet a child's social needs. So is the child able to, you know, interact with others? Now, obviously, when parents are having a first child, the child won't have any other kids to interact with. It's only the parents. So the parents have to make sure that they are available there to look after the first child, especially because the first child doesn't have siblings that they can interact with. Okay, so obviously the parents need to be able to give the child love, regardless of what child it is, first, second, third, whatever. All children should be given love, attention, confidence, and the opportunities to achieve what they want to achieve and be independent. So that means the parent shouldn't essentially smother them or make them feel like they're suffocating, watching their every move. Parents should always give an opportunity for their children to be independent, to try out new things. So if a child wants to kind of put their clothes on themselves, the parent should allow them to do that. If the child wants to eat themselves with a spoon and try it out, the parent should be allowing them to do that. Okay, so that's the first consideration. The second consideration is, again, continuing with the child's needs, but we're looking at emotional needs, okay, and intellectual needs. So children need to feel stable and safe. They need to feel a sense of emotional security. So essentially, they need to feel like they are safe and secure. And a lot of the time, when we are able to make a child feel safe and secure, that also affects their mental health and well-being, because they're obviously less stressed, okay? They're less anxious. They know that someone will be there who is a dependable and reliable person who will look after them. And the next thing is intellectual needs. So intellectual needs is obviously, as the child gets older, you're providing that child with opportunities to basically be intellectually stimulated. So they've got like little like toys they can kind of push around. They've got like, you know, little building blocks, or they've got something where they can practice some kind of motor skill or some kind of cognitive skill there. Okay, and you are giving that child the opportunities to learn about their environment and control and manipulate their environment. So that's basically the child's needs being met. Now, the next consideration is that, can I provide the child with an environment that will promote optimal development? So this is again talking about the fact that when you have a child, you need to be able to provide them with a nice, safe home, a home that is basically not messy, like we see in the second picture here, but nice and clean. Everything's organized. There's nothing that could be a choking hazard anywhere on the floor for the child, and that child is able to develop in the best way in all the areas of development there. Okay, so that's essentially what we mean when we talk about providing them with that optimal environment. Okay, so this is just some data just for you to look at, just to get an idea. So this is the green one on the right-hand side is American data, but it would be kind of similar for Australia as well. On the left-hand side, though, the pie graph is Australian data. So in 2016 to 2017, this graph is just showing you the hospitalized assault cases. So for children aged 0 to 14, which percentage of children went to hospital for assault, and who was the person that carried out that assault. So you can see that almost 48% of assault cases that led to the child going to hospital were carried out by a parent, carer, or other family member. And that is a huge number, okay? A lot of the time, strangers are very little, other persons are like 0, and then acquaintance or friends are like 14%. So family members are generally the ones that will perpetrate or that will carry out the assault the most compared to other groups or other people. So we have to remember that, and we have to remember that when we are bringing a child into the world, that they're not coming into this kind of an environment where they are going to end up in hospital as a result of being assaulted by a family member. Okay, so that is essentially just to give you an idea. Okay, the next consideration or the next question we might ask ourselves is, are the changes that parenting will bring acceptable? So essentially, some parents aren't ready to become parents, okay? Or some adults, they have like an expectation of what parenting will be like, and then when the reality sets in, they just can't take it. Or some parents or some adults like the idea of becoming a parent, but they don't like all the hard work that comes with it. Okay, so essentially when you become a parent, you have to realize that you are going to let go of some of your personal freedom, your free time, your personal time to look after that child. Okay, if you're someone who normally goes out a lot, you might be going out less. Okay, if you're someone who usually, you know, if you're an adult and you drink a lot before pregnancy, obviously after you have a baby, you shouldn't be drinking as much because it can impair your thinking and your coordination and all that stuff. We also have to remember that when people have a baby, financial priorities change. So things like how much money you're going to have left over at the end of the month is going to be different because you are looking after a child and you have to buy them all those proper resources. So it is important that it's not just about focusing everything on the baby, but also focusing on the relationship that the two parents these two new parents have with each other, and making sure that they openly communicate, that they're on the same page, that they understand the expectations. And a lot of parents actually go to like parental counseling before the child is born, so that they're on the same page, and that so no further like intense conflicts will occur once the baby is brought into the world. Okay, so essentially that is what parenting is about. Okay, now just to finish off for today, we're just looking at what are the different forms of support that parents can have. So we're talking about obviously social support. So when we've got new parents, it's very important for them to have social support. Parenting isn't something that you can watch a YouTube video about and then become an expert parent. You have to obviously, you have to do parenting. You can't just simply read about it. So parenting is not easy, and because parenting is not easy, a lot of the time new parents turn to people around them who have already had kids, okay? They might be asking their own parents, they might be asking their doctors who've already had kids, they might be asking their friends. So essentially that social support is very, very important for new parents. Okay, social support doesn't just have to mean sitting with that person for 2 hours and talking to them. It could even be in the form of money, okay? It could be in the form of just getting a babysitter to help with looking after the other kids while you focus on the baby. It could be helping with meal preparation, okay? It could be just sharing advice, could be assisting with household tasks like taking taking the kids out to play while you look after the baby or whatever, like all that kind of stuff is social support. Now, people or parents who have higher levels of social support are better equipped to cope with stresses, and they're more likely to develop resilience, which is again our ability to bounce back after some kind of stress. Social support also helps the child to understand that there are other social connections around them that they can then turn to. So if you've got a new baby in the house, the baby's clinging to the mother, but then the aunt or the uncle is always in the house as well, or always coming around and kind of like, speaking to the baby will eventually be happy in the arms of an aunt or an uncle, and not always wanting to only be in the arms of their mother. So again, it's important to also expose the baby to new social contacts and social changes in that social environment. The next type of support that new parents usually expect and are benefited by is emotional support. So emotional support is this idea that generally a lot of the time new parents do feel emotionally unsupported. They are likely to feel upset. They're likely to feel disappointed that, they tried so hard but the baby's still crying. They're likely to feel frustrated that they can't do everything they used to do before they were parents. So parents need that emotional support. They don't need people to say that, oh, you know what, that's not how you should be doing this, or, that's the wrong way. Let me teach you the right way. A lot of the time, they already doubt their abilities. So it's important for, rather than other people picking faults on what they do, it's important for them to just check in and see that the person is okay. So rather than monitoring the parenting that this new parent is doing, you're monitoring the actual person and how they feel, because that's what emotional support is about. Okay, when parents have good emotional support, they're likely to become better parents. They're likely to acknowledge that they will make little mistakes here and there, but that, obviously they are trying their best, and it's important to acknowledge them for that. Okay, so what are the resources that new parents need? Number one is knowledge. New parents need a lot of knowledge in order to understand how they can be good parents, and knowledge comes under health literacy, so basic knowledge and basic ideas. Obviously, you're not going to really roughly handle a new baby. You have the basic health literacy or the basic common sense that if you are to, treat a baby roughly, you could harm them because they're very fragile. Okay, so essentially that's what knowledge is about. Also, your level of education can affect that too. So generally people who finish schooling tend to have a better idea of how to look after a child and the basic health behaviors compared to a parent who doesn't have or hasn't finished basic schooling. So that's what knowledge is about. Knowledge is having the basic common sense and the basic general knowledge to look after a baby. And another thing that is benefited if you have at least finished schooling or you finished a university degree is that you are likely to be able to get a job. And when you get a job and you're getting money, that's going to help you to be in a better place to look after the baby, buy the baby more toys that will help them to build skills, buy them more nappies, more resources and all that kind of stuff. That will give them a better environment to live in. The next type of resource that parents need is material resources. And material resources is connected to what I just said. Obviously, they are expensive. They are considered daily expenses. But if you are working a good job because you've had good knowledge and a good education, you will be able to afford the daily expenses. Okay. Increased grocery bills will be one. A lot of new parents buy little like special.
Miss, I thought you said we're done last slide.
Well, no, I need to finish this topic. So just wait, you've got 2 more minutes. Okay, so basically we're talking about grocery bills, we're talking about higher spending for medications, and we are talking about also spending on the child's clothing. So that's essentially all the different things that we need to include when we talk about material resources. Also later on, the childcare can become a significant cost as well. So that is essentially something else that we have to take into consideration. So it's important to remember that parents don't only need knowledge, but they also need material resources, okay? Because your knowledge is not only enough to raise a child and give them the resources that they require. So essentially that is what resources for new parents is about. Okay, so that's basically it for today. So essentially the learning activities that you need to do for today, sorry, not the learning activities, the questions, I'll just put them down on this slide, but first I'll just stop the recording here.